May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. If you could hear the voice of God, would you want to keep it secret? Thus begins the mission of St. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Catholic Order of Jesuits, in the film under the same title. Today we celebrate the conversion of St. Paul to follow Jesus. He heard Jesus' voice as he was actively persecuting Christians. Paul, a zealous Jew who sought the voice of God and found it unexpectedly. And he didn't keep it secret, but share it with everyone, even with non-Jewish people. In a way, Paul had it easy, really. He heard the voice, he hears the voice, and then he's blinded. What else could you ask for? What else does he need to believe God is doing something bigger in his life? But how would we seek God? How do we seek God? To seek God requires faith. Another Jesuit, a contemporary one this time, says in one of his books, and I quote, "I often wonder why, if God exists, is he not a little more visible? Why has he not made it easier? Why, if he truly resurrected, doesn't he walk our streets with unworried normality? Or why doesn't he come to our prayer in such a clear manner that we may not have to wonder if he truly was there, or if it was a feeling fruit of our illusion?" He continues saying, "I believe an evident God would make us slaves. We would immediately be creatures that were forced to render worship to that superior Godhead. All our life would be an act of imposed obedience rather than chosen faithfulness." To seek God requires faith. We can see that the men accompanying Paul to Damascus could not hear the voice of Paul that Paul heard. Did they not have faith? At any rate, what we can know for certain is that it must have been crucial for God to intervene in Paul's life in such a way. Hearing the voice of God can be all well and jolly, but if we do not hear, what if we do not hear the voice of God? What if we do not hear it? What if God chooses to talk to us in a different way? After all, faith is trusting in a God who is not the way we want him to be. C.S. Lewis said, "An impersonal God, well and good. A subjective God of beauty, truth and goodness inside of our heads? Better still. A formless life force surging through us, a vast power which we can tap. Best of all, but God himself alive, the hunter, king, husband. That is quite another matter. Supposing we really found him. We never meant it to come to that. Worse still, supposing he had found us. And he has found us. He found Paul, and Paul said, "What will I do, Lord?" He was open to the possibility that God cannot be ruled by his credentials or prestige and caste, but to walk with God in his own terms, even when that means being blinded and let others guide him. trusting in this kind of God requires not just faith, but also openness to have our schemes completely changed. Like having a pandemic in our life, imagine. So faith and openness are required to see God in our lives, but sometimes God talks to us and we do not realize that it is us whom God has chosen for the job. Verse 14 of our reading in Acts today tells us that God chose Paul to know his will. What is required of Paul is to be attentive to the sound that comes from God's mouth. Faith, attentiveness, and openness to change. How can we keep faithfulness, attentively looking to what God is doing in us and in others? In the middle of a pandemic and in the isolation of our lockdown, in what ways is God showing us the sound that comes from his mouth? Perhaps as disciples, we can exercise our faithfulness by worshipping God just as you and I are doing now. Or being attentive to small details of our lives and being open to smile in the face of difficulty, knowing that the Holy One of Israel is faithful and has chosen us.